Welcome to Killer Women with your host, bestselling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Sarina Bowen. Sarina is a #1 Amazon bestselling author, a 24-time USA Today bestseller, and a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of contemporary novels. Formerly a derivatives trader on Wall Street, Sarina graduated magna cum laude from Yale University with a BA in economics. Sarina's books are published in more than 15 languages with 20 international publishers. Hi, welcome, Sarina.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
It's so great to talk to you too. And I always love reading your bio. I feel like I moderated a panel and I was like, a derivatives trader, because that's exactly where we think we're all going to start when we write novels. So I
Okay.
love the cover. Serena and I were just discussing the fact that we came wearing some matching pinks today.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners about Dying to Meet You.
Well, I thought of this book a long time ago. Like this usually happens to me, especially with suspense, where I need to think of the idea and then think about it for a couple of years.
A couple years.
And this book,
That's good.
oh, definitely. I mean, so I first got an inkling for the idea for this book when my oldest son was 16 and he's 21 now. And, and he got an e-bike during COVID and he was riding it all over the place on our country roads and it seemed really dangerous to me. And his scrawny little body out there on these roads where people drive too fast on the curves. And it really was, a big moment of parenting worry. So I started to use that Find My app and I would sort of track him to see that he ended up at soccer practice, 9 miles away like he was supposed to. And then it became this sort of eerie feeling to watch that dot move on the map. And it's comforting in like a way that is really truly meaningless. Like I can not really tell what his experience is, but yet I'm this oddly like watching it. I just set off a lot of thoughts in my mind about what this new technology really tells us and what it really doesn't, and what was my relationship to it. And so of course, because it's our job, right? I started thinking, what is the creepiest thing that could happen?
Right. What can go wrong? Exactly.
Right. Exactly. And that's what led me to the premise of this novel, which is a woman in her 40s, and she has a teenage daughter, but a terrible romantic history, like really, traumatic. And she hasn't dated anybody in a really long time until she was dating this great guy, and he dumps her by text message because, hello, 2025. And then she's so mad, but she starts following him around Portland, Maine on the app because he shared his location and then forgot. And she's watching him go out to dinner and go to the movies, and she's seething, right? And she should maybe deal with this in a healthy way by, say, watching a rom-com or having some ice cream. But instead, she follows him around digitally. She's his stalker, basically, for a week or so. And then she snaps one night when he goes and parks his in their spot where they used to watch the sky turn pink over the water. And she leashes up the dog and she goes out for a walk to see who else is in that car. He's dead.
Right. He's shocked. I love that. And actually, it's so funny that you said that. I do feel like that sort of obsessive, when you in a breakup happens really fast and really badly, it makes perfect sense to me that that's what Rowan would do. So Rowan is an architect, and the place where she's parked is in front of this incredible mansion, right? That she's responsible for, doing the architect on the Wincott Mansion, the wealthiest family in Maine. And yeah, and to add, insult to injury, like her ex is not as far away as she had thought him to be. So that is her husband,
Yeah.
daughter's dad. So
Yeah.
I love the idea of the 2 years. It's so fabulous. So, um, take me through the process for you. Like, are you, or, obviously you're sort of, the 2 years is sort of for the idea to gel. Like, oh, this is what, might happen. At that point, before you write, is it all organized in your brain how it's going to happen? What's your sort of planning process before you start writing?
Well, usually when a book really comes together for me, like this one did, it's not just one idea, it's like a few of them. So I had this thing about this app that was really torturing me, and I needed to figure out how that became a great story. But then also, I had done some reading about maternity homes and how those uh, evolved. They became a uniquely American thing, and they kind of hit their peak before birth control was even really legal for unmarried women in this country, which took far longer than I had remembered. And so that's a shocking thing all of itself. And then, so I needed to find all the elements of the book before I could write it. Like there's this interesting bit about the history of this mansion, and then there's this guy she was dating, and it's also a story about all the men in her life, all the sort of not super trustworthy people and how we hurt each other without meaning to. Because, the story I told about how she's stalking her ex, I mean, come on, it used to be if you wanted to be a stalker, you had to leave like scary scary messages
Right?
and follow people and be like a really, you had to really want it. But now to stalk each other, all we have to do is open this app. And I just liked the complexity of that, like the things that are well-meaning and then turn dark. So all of those different ideas in this book really come together to deliver like a much more complicated problem than she ever saw coming. And as a reader, that's what I really like in a thriller, is when there's this thing that gets you into the story and it's kind of fascinating, but then it turns out that the real story is just much more complicated than that. And that's kind of what I pulled off. So yeah, I had to plan the heck out of it, and I've had to get better at that because I have written lots of romance novels before I started writing suspense. And they're not um they're not completely simpler, but you're not really matching wits with the reader to this same degree. Like it's not quite the puzzle, it's not quite the cat and mouse game, you know. So I had to up my game in terms of making sure that the suspense had all those elements that are necessary, and I find that that does really take planning. And I know that some people do this job without, all the planning that I put into it, and I think those people are terrifying.
Well, I mean, some of us don't put the planning in that way. We write, unfortunately, what that means is, for 190,000 word book, I've written 170,000 words because
Yeah.
I go through and then I'm like, that didn't work. So then, and you just get a little smarter and a little closer each time. So I would love to plan if I could figure out how to do that, but it's never quite worked for me. But let's go back. I love the idea also, like, as you said, these sort of well-meaning things that go wrong because of course the maternity home is similar, right? It's an America's puritanical spirit, that we would create a safe place for, children out of wedlock to be born theoretically, but we are of course shaming the women, and then,
Right.
he's going, and how are they getting there, and all those wonderful things. But on top of that, Rowan is dealing also with, her daughter Natalie, who's, you mentioned your son, but Natalie is at about, that age where she's, gonna at summertime, she's gonna get her first job. How's she gonna get there?
Mhm.
Where's she gonna work?
Yeah.
And then, it sort of comes there are elements of even your son's bike ride that show up in the story, which I love. And I do, there's something kind of, there's all sorts of dark, worst case scenario thoughts I think that have crossed my mind over the years. But the ones related to that hit at that mother fear are always
Hmm.
the most terrifying, right? They're the most
Yeah.
Yeah, they just get you.
Yeah. So you mentioned the well-meaning idea in terms of the maternity homes, and after that's exactly how I felt about it too. And then I really did a lot of research about it, like much more than ever lands in this book. And I landed on it was never really that well-meaning.
That's how
That,
they
you
sell
know,
it, right? They sell it to the girl's parents or even the girl herself as like, oh, this is what, this is the best scenario for your unfortunate actions, And yet, of course, right. It's no, I think,
right. And many times they sold it to you owe this to your child.
yes,
You have made this terrible mistake, and the only way for you to redeem yourself is to give up this child. And that bill of sale was, pushed on so many women for 50 years until these places petered out.
thankfully.
Um, yeah, and for anyone who's interested in that aspect, there's just some really incredible nonfiction about these women's stories and how horrifying they were. And so I feel that all that research that I did for this book was really um important for me. Like I wanted to know all of that, even though the barest sliver of it actually ends up in this novel. So yeah.
Does that happen often? I mean, that you feel like you deep dive into some subject that is really mostly for your own foundation in writing about something, or is this sort of a unique experience for you?
Um, no, it does. I that happens to me a lot. Um, I mean, let's talk about the 5 months worth of figure skating lessons I just took for a different.
Let's hear about that. Yeah, for sure. What are we working on?
Well, that I have a book coming out in November called Thrown for a Loop, and it's a romance with a figure skater who is now a skating coach. And in order to get her language correct, I realized that it would be really great if I talked to a figure skating coach. So I signed up for lessons, and I made it through an entire season without like injuring
I
myself.
know.
So,
That's the win right there. I love it.
right.
That's fantastic. So instead of just interviewing a coach, you're like, I might as well just sign up and do the lesson.
Yeah. But of course, interviewing is where we usually land. And for this book, I also interviewed this fascinating and hilarious human named retired Lieutenant Tim Cotton of the Bangor Police Department. And I I found him on Facebook where he was writing for years and still writes sometimes, I think, even though he's recently retired, the Bangor police updates on Facebook, and they're hilarious.
It's
Like,
awesome. I love
yeah.
those little police blotters. Yeah.
Well, he's a writer himself, and you can really tell. Like, you can absolutely tell when you read his updates about the holidays and how not to kill each other that he cares about the writing too. So because this book is set in Maine, it's not a procedural novel. There isn't a lot of detective work in the book, but what's there, you don't want to get that wrong.
No, no, people do not like that. Right, right.
Right. So I needed to get that correct. And I thought, I'm just going to ask this man if he will talk to me because he's the only law enforcement officer I can name from Maine. And it would just be such a pleasure to interview Tim Cotton about this book. So he said yes. And I had a couple of wonderful wandering phone calls about a murder investigation in Maine. And, he steered me away from certain mistakes that I was probably going to make. But he just made the book richer for me hearing him think about what he would do.
And you did some research on some sort of psychosis stuff that happens with drug use too. I mean, that is, I mean, we don't need to get into the details, but there's a lot of stuff in this book that you obviously had done. I'm assuming you didn't make that up, right?
Right, right, right.
So,
Yeah, the drug thing actually is very real. And I personally know somebody that this happened to. And but anyway, yes, that stuff, research isn't just there so that you don't get stuff wrong, but it's like the good stuff
Yeah, it's
of
fine.
any book.
I mean, for sure.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, give me a heroine with a weird job. Give me a hero with a really strange life experience. Like that's where all the good stuff is. It's not just there to not mess up. But of course, I do know an architect, and I did some architectural writing early on in my writing career. Like I wrote some articles for architectural magazines. Um, but I hadn't done that in a long time, so I had to take an architect out to lunch and just say, is it logical that my heroine would be the only architect on this project? Does it make sense that she, would behave this way? What would she be doing at this point?
Right.
How would her day look at this point in the project? And she helped me a lot, and yeah, it was really fun as well.
And there's this sort of hidden artifacts in the home as well, which is really fun. There's a lot of layering, beautiful layering in the book, different details, and it does feel it feels very authentic, which is super fun. Her parenting, her job, the mansion itself, the really wealthy people, the police, and in the end, also the Tim, the man she had dated and liked quite a bit, who ghosted her, which was, not very nice of him. So, um, that's okay. So when you start a book, so are you already, is there are there bubbling thriller? It sounds like you've got a romance coming out in November. Are there budding thriller ideas in line? Do you alternate
Yep,
romance, thriller, romance, or how does that work too?
I do alternate. And you know how it is. Like when you are working really hard on a book, it's always the book you're not working on that's like speaking to you.
Yeah,
And that's just life.
yeah.
And it's because when you let yourself not worry about a project, then it's easier to have ideas about it. And anyway, so I am working right this minute, I'm working on a romance. But then in the second half of this summer, I will switch back and I am writing a thriller that's in progress already, but it's due in November and it hasn't been announced yet. But technology creeps into all of my stories. And you can tell that it's something I love. I read Wired magazine every single month. I'm really interested in issues of privacy. Those are the articles that I click on in the newspaper. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She's a New York Times bestselling YA author, but her day job is that she's an academic in the fields of psychology and also fiction.
Oh,
And she writes about our relationship with fictional characters and why we spend so much time on things that we know that they're not real. And she also gives talks to writers where she suggests keeping an id list of those things that you are so interested in that you always come back to them. And then after I
oh,
listened to this wisdom, I realized that, she said, like, I love rooftops. Every one of my books has a scene on the roof. And
oh,
then after she sort of turned on my awareness to these things, I started to be able to count the things in my own work that recur because I love them so much.
mhm.
And when we use those things that we really love, then the reader can tell that how much you care.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is real. That's even as you're talking, I'm like, what are mine? But I know immediately. I'm like, oh, I like women who are, having to struggle to get themselves out of something for sure. That's the
Uh-huh.
underdog, the female underdog but that is really interesting. I love that. We'll have tell me her name again so we can all hear it and write it down.
Jennifer Lynn Barnes.
Okay, that's so fun. Um,
Yeah, and you find that they will be big things and small things. Like you mentioned, women who are trying to climb out of a situation, like that's kind of a bigger thing. And then you might eventually say, like, oh my God, there's so many tacos in these books,
I
So
love a taco.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to keep track of that, and then I even evolved it to like, okay, well, what news stories do I always click on? What can I not pass up?
Yeah.
And it turns out that that's like stories about old documents that suddenly turn up, a letter delivered 85 years late, library book that is 100 years past its due date, piece of art in the attic that turns out to be a Van Gogh. Like all of that stuff is something I would click on.
And there's
And
some of that in this, right? There's a book
yeah,
yeah, like a diary that
right, that she found in the floorboards. I
yeah.
mean, give me all the diaries found in the
I
floorboards.
know, right? That's so fun. It's so fun. And, and I think we can playing with things like that when they're, authentically placed. Now, if the structure was built in 2000, we would have a hard time believing that you'd found an old journal in the basement or under the floorboards. But in this sense, and also there's some very real, there's a very pivotal scene that we understand something that happened in the home that's very, we're not going to spoil it. You have to read it. But there are moments where the home has this sort of a lot of lives, right? The mansion
Yeah.
has a lot of lives, and and there's some lovely romance stuff in here too, which I really appreciate when a book has, the layers of that as well. And it's not the primary piece of the story at all, but I like that you weave that in. Do thriller elements show up in your romance? Um,
Yes, actually,
okay.
sure.
Yeah.
But also the thing about a romance that um when they come up in a thriller, I mean, it definitely raises the stakes.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So, why shouldn't it be there? And I also have a lot of readers who romance is their primary interest. So I don't know, it's just really, it feels right to me to incorporate those elements in a book like this, even if it's the B story, as you said.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I also think that the idea that people read, like if you're a Sarina Bowen reader, whether you're reading your romances or your thrillers, they're going to get the you in all those stories. It's more the publishers, I feel like, that are like, I mean, obviously romance or thrillers, you can tell a lot from the cover of a book, whether or not you're reading
Mhm.
like if it's a romance or a thriller. It used to be, and I don't know if you ran into this when I started writing. My first book came out in 2000, so I've dated myself there. But basically it was like they wanted me writing romantic suspense. That was what women writers who wanted murder, they wrote. And I never really I was never very good at the romance part of it. I was much better at suspense. So I, resisted and eventually was able to just write suspense. Um, but I feel like, you used to have to stay in your lane. You pick the thing you want.
Mhm.
Now I love that, you get to do both. Do you have two publishers or are you published by is it the same
I,
publisher?
I do, as it happens, have two publishers.
Yeah, that's
And
good too, I think.
yeah, and my romance editor pretty much edits romance, and my suspense editor, I think, doesn't really generally edit romance. So there's some specialization there as well.
Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
writing two books a year. Is that what's happening here?
Yes. Yes.
Wow. So tell us about I mean, you're obviously writing is full time and your children are a little bit older, but how do
Yeah.
are you doing one and then finishing it and but then there's copy edits, things are coming, sort of weaving them together. How does that work?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but two books is like the fewest number that I will have written in the last 10 years. Um, but also romance is faster.
Mhm.
It's faster for a couple reasons. Like people love to slam romance as being like super simple and predictable, and it's not. If it were, then my life would be so easy. I would have
We
much more
have a lot
time.
more successful romance writers. So yes, I appreciate.
But But the thing about romance is that if you write in series, then you're not starting from scratch. Like when I started this book, I didn't have any characters carrying over from any other book, and I was really creating everything out of whole cloth. And in most of the romance that I write, there are some elements that are known. Like the book that I'm working on right now is a book two.
Okay.
The world is established. It's just easier. And also the editing burden for romance, at least for me, is a little bit less. Like when I'm in the middle of the arc of a romance book, I know exactly where I am. But in suspense, it's harder. and it requires more input from others because you are trying to craft clues and they have to be shaded in such a way that they're present, but they don't dominate, and you don't give this away, but you have to hint at that. And I really find that one human being cannot deliver that package without some help from others. So they just take more time, I think.
So you,
And I,
oh, sorry, yeah.
no, I was just going to say I work with a content editor in the middle of writing my suspense novels, and I don't generally do that for romance.
Yeah, I have somebody who reads along with me. I sort of call her a book whisperer because didn't do it until this last book, which will be my 17th. So I probably could have started it sooner. It might have been helpful. But I do, she kind of keeps me on like, these are the balls that are still in the air. These are the balls that have landed. This is where I think that it puts them. And so this is what, we're looking at in terms of clues. And because I think it's to your point earlier with a thriller, when you're reading a romance novel, as a reader, I think you're enjoying the way that it sort of unfolds. You're not like, how's she gonna, where's the miscommunication gonna be, or where's the whatever. With a thriller reader, we are engaged trying to solve it, and I think that does makes the readers, they have to be, you don't want to necessarily outsmart them too much, but you don't want them to figure it out on page 30 because, that's not the game they want to play. So,
Yeah,
it makes sense to me. Okay, so normally
right.
you're writing 3 or 4, 9 books a year.
Well, usually I'm 3 to 4, but I accomplish that by never leaving my house. So,
So and finally you're like, I kind of want to leave.
yeah. And also, honestly, because things keep happening in my life that sort of require this. Like I put out a book, and then that series suddenly does really well, and I didn't know that was going to happen. So then I have to fit that in. And I kept sort of um creating my own problem, creating my own workload by things working. And now I'm just like, okay, we have to stop this somehow.
Well, these are
And I
good
just
problems to have, but yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I slowed it down on purpose. I'm writing 2 books this year. That's just going to have to do. And it's lovely. I just came back from a long trip, and I haven't been on one of those in a long time. So,
Uh-huh.
yay.
Well, in your success, you deserve a downtime. I think it's hard. It's interesting though. I mean, obviously we all deserve downtime, but it is hard as an author, I think, when your business is your own and, your income comes really from producing, right? I mean, although, we
Mhm.
get residuals, but I find it hard also to take a break. If I turn in a book and everybody says, well, take some time, I am immediately like, what? I can't take any time. I haven't
Yes.
even know what the next thing is yet. I'm freaking out. So,
Yes.
right? It is kind of it's a weird little
It's bad.
ad. And I don't know, are there authors out there who just say, oh yeah, I'm just gonna take I used to think I'm gonna write through June and then I'm gonna take July and August because those are I'm in Montana and the rest of the year is you can have really miserable cold days and so I can get myself easy to, work, but I never successfully take July and August off. I'm always like, I mean the timing doesn't always work either, but I just don't I can't sit still. It makes me too nervous. So.
Yeah. And plus, even when things are going well, we always have this feeling that the party could stop at any moment. So you have to keep, thinking about it. I did, as we discussed earlier, I worked a dozen years on Wall Street, and there are days when I miss that corporate paycheck
Of
where it's
course.
just going to land in my bank account no matter what.
Yes, of course. And in some ways, the writing also is a job you never leave behind. Like, I mean, I'm not sure how much, but I was in finance for 10 years and I left those days as intense as they were behind. Like I got home and
Mhm.
I was, it was my family but writing, I feel like I'm always having a conversation with whoever's in the room with me and the 3 other people who are not in the room, do not exist in the world, but are in my head.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel I know we acknowledge how lucky we are to get to do what we do, but also
Mhm.
it is tricky and it doesn't really ever kind of let you go.
Right. And I did. I have also a finance job that was done at 5 o'clock. Like the market literally closed and everybody went home and then we started again the next day. And I can't even remember what that feels like now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it's wonderful. Okay, so you can tell it's throw me for a loop. What's the name of the romance that's coming out?
Thrown for a loop.
Thrown for a loop. I knew I heard
Yeah.
the part and I lost everything else.
Yep.
So tell her also I just got the final copy as our giveaway.
Pretty.
This will be on
Okay.
the book Killer Women page as a giveaway coming up. Now I'm getting caught up. I was traveling for the month of May or no, it is May. I'm traveling for the month of April and now I'm home. So everybody should go check out. This is a giveaway. The cover is fabulous. I love what they did here.
Thanks.
So tell our listeners where to find you if they want to follow you, keep up with and try your romances and all that stuff. What's the best place to see all the things Sarina Bowen?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram. Sarina.Bowen is like a great channel. My website has lots of information on it. And yeah,
Are you
that would work great.
SarinaBowen.com?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'll spell it for those listeners. Sarina's Sarina, Bowen, Bowen. So check her out. Sarina, it was so fun to get to talk to you about Dying to Meet You, which I loved. I have 2 copies here, which is so fun.
You too. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
So much fun. And will I see you at Thriller Fest?
Not this year.
Well, it was really fun to see you there last year, and hopefully we'll get to see you again soon.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you everyone for joining us on Killer Women today with Sarina Bowen. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.